Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world long gone, a place where the moonlight glitters on savanna grass and shadows stretch like ghosts across ancient landscapes. You are here, barefoot in the dust, listening to night insects pulse with a rhythm older than civilization itself. The air is sharp, tinged with smoke from a small fire nearby, and you sense two kinds of humans, your kind, Homo Sapiens, and another, sturdier cousin, Homo Erectus. They walk under the same stars, hunt the same game, and tremble before the same storms. And yet, only one of them will leave a lasting trace in the story that becomes you. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this night unless you learn fast, because predators lurk everywhere, and even your cousins across the clearing might not always be friendly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in bed, let me know where you are and what time it is, whether it's 9 p.m. in Chicago, 3 a.m. in Manila, or a lazy afternoon nap in Sao Paulo. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch by the fire, watching sparks rise into the dark. In front of you, two figures sit on opposite sides of the flames, each from a different branch of humanity. To your left, a Homo erectus, compact, with a barrel chest, heavy brow ridge, and eyes glinting like polished stone. To your right, a Homo sapiens, face slimmer, forehead higher, gaze darting and quick, like someone already plotting 3 moves ahead. Both groups breathe the same smoke, roast the same tubers, but the differences whisper louder than the crackling wood. You trace your finger along the dirt, drawing their shared timeline. Homo erectus has already walked the earth for almost 2 million years, a staggering stretch of time. They were the pioneers, the ones who first learned to tame fire, to strike flakes from stone into tools sharp enough to cut flesh and sinew. They spread far from Africa, trudging through Asia, even reaching the islands of Java. In fact, they lasted longer than any other hominin species. You have to give them credit. In the evolutionary game, they were the marathon runners, not the sprinters. But then your eyes shift to the sapiens across the fire. This newcomer, your own lineage, appears fragile in comparison. Homo sapiens has only been around for a few 100,000 years at this point, a blink compared to Erectus. Yet you can't help but notice the gleam of curiosity, the playful flecks of imagination. Where Erectus snaps a tool the same way for millennia, Sapiens fiddles, tweaks, and reinvents. And sometimes, let's be honest, reinvention is just smashing things until something works. We still do this with IKEA furniture, so clearly it's genetic. The night stretches on, and you hear faint rustles from the grasslands. A hyena's laugh echoes, mocking, hungry. Both groups stir nervously, because here's the reality check. In this world, humans are not apex predators. You're meat. Without fire, without sharp stone or strong arms, you'd be a midnight snack. And if you're lucky, the hyenas eat you quickly. If not, well, let's not linger there before bed. Still, firelight makes a difference. Archaeologists argue endlessly about who truly mastered fire first. Was it Erectus, patiently coaxing sparks into flame nearly 1 million years ago? Or was it Sapiens, who turned fire not just into survival, but into culture, gatherings, stories, rituals? Historians still debate whether the embers in an ancient cave hearth belonged to one species or the other. But either way, tonight you sit in the glow of that gift, and you realize this fire is more than warmth. It is division. For Erectus, fire keeps the night away. For Sapiens, it creates community. You glance again at the Erectus figure. Their life is practical, sturdy, reliable. They know how to hunt with spears, how to chop wood, how to endure. They've done it for countless generations. But their faces are unreadable, almost mask-like, as if thoughts stay locked inside their skulls. Meanwhile, the Sapiens hums softly, tapping fingers on a bone, maybe inventing the rhythm of a song. You sense something here. Sapiens does not just survive the night. They fill it with meaning, with strange symbols that might not feed the stomach, but somehow feed the spirit. Out beyond the firelight, you picture herds of elephants trudging, lions crouching, crocodiles lurking in rivers, and you can't help laughing softly to yourself. Because despite all the differences, both Erectus and Sapiens probably had the same unglamorous problem: mosquitoes. You think about it. Millions of years of evolution, stone tools, fire, migration across continents, and still you're swatting at bugs whining in your ear. Nature has a sense of humor. As you follow these two groups deeper into prehistory, you notice something else: overlap. For thousands of years, they coexisted. In some valleys, Erectus huddled in caves while Sapiens passed by on hunts. Did they meet, fight, or simply ignore each other? Some scholars imagine clashes: stones thrown, spears raised, one group pushing the other from scarce watering holes. Others imagine something more complex: cautious exchanges of food, maybe even shared shelter in a storm. Historians still argue whether these cousins saw each other as enemies, rivals, or simply shadows in the night. The thought makes you shiver, because cohabitation is always messy. You've seen this at family reunions: two branches of the same tree sitting across the table, pretending not to notice old grudges. Prehistoric life wasn't so different, except the stakes were survival, not who brings the worst potato salad. The fire dies low, and you stretch, feeling the pull of sleep creep into your bones. But you know this is only the beginning. The story of why Erectus vanished while Sapiens remained is not a single dramatic battle. It's a long unraveling, like a rope fraying fiber by fiber. Tonight you'll trace each strand: brains and bodies, tools and tons, storms and migrations. Already you suspect the outcome, because here you are, Sapiens, lying in bed, listening to this story. But don't let that lull you into superiority. Remember, your species barely made it through ice ages, famines, and plagues. You're the last candle flickering on a windy night. And the fact that Erectus lasted so much longer in raw years than Sapiens has so far, that should humble you. The Erectus across the fire yawns, heavy-lidded. The Sapiens leans in, whispering something, though you can't quite catch it. Maybe it's a word, maybe just a murmur. Either way, it feels like a secret beginning, one that will ripple forward until it becomes this very bedtime tale. You close your eyes, letting the crackle of flame and the hiss of insects blend into a lullaby, carrying you into the deeper story waiting beyond. You wake with stiff shoulders, dawn stretching pale light across the horizon. The fire is nothing but a smear of ash, still warm under your palm. Around you, the figures stir, the Homo erectus rising slowly, solid and steady, while the Homo sapiens springs up with restless energy. You rub your eyes and realize, today you will follow them, side by side, to see how their brains, bodies, and tools shape the course of survival. The erectus strides first, broad-hipped and steady as a drumbeat. Their skeleton is built for endurance. Picture a torso wide like a barrel, legs thick and strong, a frame that looks ready to carry heavy loads for miles. You can almost feel the pounding rhythm of their footsteps echoing through the soil. Meanwhile, the sapiens moves differently, lighter, more upright, with long limbs swinging in a balanced rhythm. You notice their rib cage is narrower, their pelvis smaller, their skull higher and rounder. Both are human, but Sapiens carries an elegance that feels closer to your reflection in the bathroom mirror. And speaking of skulls, you lean closer to compare. Erectus sports that thick brow ridge like a built-in helmet, jutting forward above eyes that seem sunken in shadow. Their forehead slopes backward, leaving less space for frontal lobes. The Sapiens, by contrast, has a rounded skull, high forehead, and smaller face. It's like comparing an ancient SUV to a sleek sports car. One reliable, the other faster and more flexible. The mainstream fact here is unavoidable. Homo sapiens brains average around 1,350 cubic centimeters, while erectus brains range smaller, often under 1,000. Numbers aside, you can feel the difference in how each one looks at the world. The erectus eyes linger on the ground, practical and unchanging. The sapiens' eyes wander, catch the clouds, imagine shapes. You walk with them into the brush, where tools are tested. The erectus pauses, picks up a chunk of stone, and with practiced swings, knocks off flakes until it becomes a hand axe. The shape is familiar, almond, symmetrical, sharp enough to skin an antelope or dig roots. Here's the quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found nearly identical hand axes from Africa to Asia, spanning hundreds of thousands of years. It's as though Erectus found the one perfect design and just stuck with it forever. The same model, generation after generation, no upgrades. In a sense, they were the Nokia 3310 of the prehistoric world. Durable, practical, and impossible to improve. Meanwhile, the Sapiens fiddles with stone differently. They chip finer blades, smaller and sharper, attaching them to wooden shafts with resin and sinew. A spear is born. Not just a cutting tool, but a weapon that can pierce from a distance. You watch the Sapiens test the point, then balance the shaft in their hand, already imagining how far it might fly. This is the moment you realize, Erectus makes tools to use. Sapiens makes tools to think with. And that small shift, turning stone into an extension of imagination, carries consequences as large as continents. You trail them as they stalk game through tall grass. The Erectus grips their axe, prepared to close in, sweating under the sun. The Sapiens, however, throws their spear from several meters away, striking cleanly. Both bring down food, but the difference is stark. One relies on endurance and muscle, the other on strategy and distance. You can't help smirking, because even now in your modern world, you see echoes of this. Some people muscle through problems, others invent apps to get around them. Same species, same story. The day grows hotter. You notice how Erectus handles it. They simply keep walking, perspiration glistening, body built for long treks under brutal sun. Sapiens, however, adjusts, seeks shade, shares water, fans themselves with leaves. Scholars still argue whether this adaptability was purely physical or partly cultural. Did Sapiens invent more coping tricks because of bigger brains, or did they survive long enough for those brains to keep evolving? No one knows for sure, but you sense the feedback loop. Think, adapt, survive, repeat. The group pauses by a river. Erectus kneels to drink, splashing water over their face. Movement strong but routine. The Sapiens bends too, but pauses, eyeing the fish darting under the surface. You watch them sharpen a stick, jab into the water, and emerge triumphant with a wriggling catch. For Erectus, the river is a watering hole. For Sapiens, it's a larder. Two ways of seeing, one shaped by habit, the other by imagination. By noon, both groups settle in the shade of acacia trees, chewing on roots and roasted scraps. You study them closely, seeing how the bodies themselves reveal secrets. Erectus has thick bones, heavier muscles, a frame made to endure long migrations. They likely chased prey in persistence hunts, jogging for hours until antelopes collapse from exhaustion. Sapiens, though, doesn't just chase, they plan. They trap, they ambush. They use those lighter limbs for agility. And in one of those quirky human ironies, that smaller, more gracile body actually burns less energy, leaving more fuel for brain power. You run your hand over your own skull, feeling the echo of that inheritance. Your species bet everything on brains instead of brawn, and somehow it worked. But the gamble was close. Imagine a world where muscle mattered more, where cunning strategies failed. You'd have been erased like scribbles in sand. By evening, you sit again near the embers of a new fire. The Erectus sharpens their axe absent-mindedly, repeating the same motions. The Sapiens, however, begins carving notches into a bone, counting maybe, or marking a memory. Archaeologists still debate whether such scratches represent proto-writing or just idle doodles. But you, sitting there, feel the spark of something more, the birth of abstraction. Erectus survives the day. Sapiens imagines tomorrow. As the sun sets, you reflect on the rhythm of what you've seen. Erectus, reliable, unchanging, powerful. Sapiens, restless, inventive, unpredictable. It is not that one is better than the other. They are tuned to different frequencies of survival. Yet in a changing world, being tuned to change itself may be the only melody worth humming. You stretch out in the cooling dusk, belly full, listening to crickets chirr. The Erectus snores nearby, chest rising like a steady drum. The Sapiens whispers again, this time humming a tune, tapping on a log. You recognize the difference now, not just in tools or bodies, but in what lingers after the day ends. Erectus closes the chapter at night. Sapiens begins a story. And stories, as you already know, tend to outlive bones. The night air still clings to your skin, smoky and damp, when the smell of roasted meat drifts through the camp. Your stomach remember that this was not a guarantee in the prehistoric world. Today, you'll notice something different. How food and fire, and the way they are shared, mark the invisible line between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. You crouch close as Erectus pokes the fire with a stick, embers glowing hot orange. The flames lick at the edge of a carcass, a wild pig brought down earlier. Their cooking is practical. Meat on the coals, roots in the ashes, nothing fancy. Yet even this is remarkable. Mainstream anthropology fact here. Evidence suggests Homo erectus may have been the first to truly harness fire for cooking, maybe as early as 1 million years ago. That change altered everything. Cooking unlocked more calories, softened tough plants, and reduced parasites. It gave energy for longer hunts, for bigger brains. Without that leap, you wouldn't be sitting here listening to bedtime stories at all. Still, you sense a difference. For Erectus, food is fuel. They cook because it makes survival easier. Once the meat is charred enough, they pull it from the fire, share pieces in silence, and chew methodically. There's little ritual, little play, just eating. Meanwhile, the sapiens watches, then begins preparing differently. They skewer strips of meat, rotate them slowly above the flames, seasoning with crushed leaves for extra flavor. You lean closer and smell a hint of spice. Primitive, yes, but purposeful. And then comes the part that really matters. They share deliberately. One person distributes portions, making sure each member of the group gets a fair piece. You notice smiles, laughter, a little teasing. Somehow the sapiens turn dinner into a performance, a moment of bonding. You nibble a chunk of roasted tuber, earthy and sweet, and realize this is the hinge of the story. It's not just about fire. It's about what fire does to people. Erectus uses it to keep predators away, to soften calories. Sapiens uses it to pull the group together, weaving invisible threads of trust. And trust, you suspect, is harder to build than fire itself. The quirky tidbit you remember is almost too strange to believe. Some archaeologists argue that fire changed human anatomy, especially teeth and jaws. By softening food, cooking reduced the need for massive molars and heavy jaw muscles. Over generations, jaws shrank, skulls reshaped, voices gained more flexibility. In other words, your ability to gossip in a cafe today may trace back to some Erectus chewing on smoky antelope ribs under the stars. You grin at the thought, humankind evolved on barbecue nights. But the debate lingers. Historians still argue whether Homo erectus's cooking habits were cultural or just scattered accidents. Did they truly master regular fire use, or did they stumble upon it when lightning set a tree ablaze? Did they guard embers and carry them in bark bundles across miles? Or did they spark flames from scratch? The archaeological record whispers but never shouts. Yet sitting here tonight, you feel the urgency. In a landscape crawling with leopards, having fire at night is not a luxury. It's the thin red line between safety and being dragged into the grass. As the feast continues, you see the social patterns emerge more clearly. The Erectus eats quietly, each piece consumed where it's caught. No ceremony, no long conversations, just chewing until the bones are clean. Then they toss leftovers aside, where jackals and vultures quickly scavenge. The sapiens, however, collects bones in a pile, cracks them with stones to suck out marrow, then throws them into the fire to keep scavengers away. Clever, tidy, cooperative. You can't help but think, Sapiens doesn't just consume food. They curate it. And then comes a moment that makes your spine tingle. One Sapiens picks up a chunk of charcoal and begins tracing lines on a rock, zigzags, circles, meaningless yet mesmerizing. Is it doodling? Is it memory? You remember that some of the earliest symbolic marks in caves date tens of thousands of years after Erectus vanished. Still, you feel the foreshadowing here. The hunger for expression beyond survival. Fire gives light, and suddenly shadows become canvases. Your belly full, you lean back against the dirt, staring at the sky. The Milky Way swirls above you, endless and quiet. Both groups fall into rest, but in different rhythms. The Erectus sleeps heavily, a pile of bodies huddled near the coals. The Sapiens sleep too, but one or two stay awake, poking the fire, whispering softly. You wonder if these whispers are gossip, plans, or stories. maybe just nonsense syllables. But in the hush of night, even nonsense feels sacred. You drift in and out of drowsy thoughts, remembering modern dinners. Candlelit restaurants, family tables, backyard grills. All of it echoes back to this, the ancient campfire where food was shared, laughter flickered, alliances cemented. It's funny, isn't it? Entire civilizations, wars, love affairs, all fueled by the same craving for shared meals. You chuckle quietly, realizing that in a way, humanity's greatest superpower might just be potluck. The fire pops, sending sparks upward, and you glance at the Erectus again. Strong, silent, efficient. They will outlast millennia, but they will not build myths. The Sapiens, with smaller muscles and larger dreams, will. And maybe that is the simplest truth about why one vanishes and the other remains. Fire gives warmth, yes, but Sapiens gives it meaning. You curl deeper into the dirt, firelight dancing on your eyelids. The taste of roasted roots lingers, smoky and sweet. In this twilight state, you sense the line between species fading. Both are human, both alive, both hungry. Yet the difference is undeniable. Erectus survives the night. Sapiens creates tomorrow's memory. The embers of last night's fire are still warm when you wake. But what really stirs you this morning is not the smell of smoke. It's the sound. A soft murmur ripples through the Sapiens group, like birds at dawn, voices rising and falling with rhythm. Across the clearing, the Erectus are silent, communicating in gestures, grunts, or the occasional sharp call. You realize today's lesson is not about bones or spears, but about breath itself, the strange power of shaping air into meaning. You rub your ears, leaning closer to the Sapiens. Their chatter flows quickly, words not yet fully formed as you know them, but unmistakably patterned. One person points at the horizon, another responds, and the group shifts its attention in unison. Here, communication is coordination. A hunt can be planned, dangers warned, alliances strengthened. You remember a mainstream fact. Linguists argue that complex speech may have blossomed around 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, well after Erectus. But the roots must stretch deeper. Proto-language, broken phrases, the seeds of gossip that eventually became grammar. The quirky tidbit is almost comical. Some scientists believe gossip itself. Yes, idle chatter about who's trustworthy, who stole meat, who looks attractive, was the evolutionary glue of Homo Sapiens society. Sharing food kept stomachs full, but sharing secrets kept tribes together. You glance at the Sapiens and imagine one whispering, "Don't sit too close to him, he never shares marrow." Suddenly you see how reputations, even prehistoric ones, might decide who survives. Meanwhile, the Erectus moves with silent efficiency. They gesture with hands, point to tracks, grunt approval or warning. This is not emptiness. It works well enough. A raised eyebrow can tell you to hush. A hand signal can guide a spear throw. Scholars still argue whether Homo erectus had any true language at all. Were they capable of stringing symbols into even crude sentences, or did their communications stop at instinctive sounds? Some evidence of the spinal cord suggests they lacked the fine motor control for the full range of speech. Yet others counter that even simple languages could leave no fossil trace. You sit here listening, realizing this debate will probably outlast your own lifetime. The Sapiens' chatter grows louder, more playful. One begins tapping stones together in rhythm while humming. Another joins, clapping hands. Soon, it's a proto-song, silly and repetitive, but undeniably more than survival. You grin, because you know this is where music begins, long before harps or violins, just voices and stones under the African sun. And when Sapiens sing, something shifts. Their shoulders relax, their eyes brighten. You feel it in your chest too, a sense of belonging. You turn back to the Erectus, steady and serious. They glance at the noisy Sapiens, confused or maybe indifferent. For them, the day is about food, not sound. They stalk into the brush, focused on hunting, each step heavy and measured. The Sapiens, however, trail behind with murmured encouragement, even jokes. You catch one Sapiens trip over a root, prompting laughter, and though it's childish, it's also bonding. A slip turns into a story turns into a lesson. Soon, every fall and triumph becomes a thread in the fabric of memory. The sun climbs, heat pressing on your shoulders. You march beside them as the hunt begins. The Erectus closes in on a warthog with silence, signaling one another with quick hand motions. The kill is efficient, brutal, effective. Meanwhile, the Sapiens plan differently. They whisper, distract the animal, circle around, and drive it towards spears already waiting. The outcome is the same: meat for dinner. But the process feels different. One group moves like parts of a machine, the other moves like characters in a play. Back at camp, the contrast sharpens. The Erectus eat with few sounds beyond chewing and the occasional bark. The Sapiens, however, retell the hunt with excitement, each person embellishing their part. One stretches arms wide to show how big the warthog looked, another mimics its squeal, a third jokes about the stumble earlier. Everyone laughs, even the embarrassed hunter. You sit back, amazed at how quickly a dangerous ordeal has transformed into entertainment. This is what language does. It rewrites reality, softens danger, magnifies triumph. You picture your own life, scrolling memes or swapping stories at dinner. The same impulse burns here. And here's the delightful absurdity. Your ancestors probably laughed at clumsy hunters the way you laugh at fail videos today. The technology changed, the instinct didn't. Humanity has always had a soft spot for slapstick. Evening draws near, and the Sapiens huddle close around the fire. The hum of words grows softer, slower, more intimate. One tells what feels like a story, pauses for effect, gestures for drama, whispers to hold attention. The Erectus sit quietly nearby, eyes on the flames, uninterested in embellishment. You find yourself caught in the Sapiens' rhythm, lulled by the cadence of a tale that may not even have meaning yet. Maybe it's just a chain of noises, but your brain fills the gaps, weaving a story anyway. Historians still argue whether symbols, scratched bones, painted caves, emerged first as art or as practical markers. Was that zigzag on a shell a decoration, a tally, or a prayer? No one knows. But tonight, listening to Sapiens chatter, you feel the inevitability of it. Words will soon spill onto walls, myths will sprout like weeds, gossip will spiral into culture. The Erectus, silent and steady, will not follow. The fire cracks, sparks floating into the sky. You tilt your head back, listening to crickets hum along with human voices. Your eyelids grow heavy, but you resist, savoring the sound. Somewhere deep inside, you know you're hearing the very first lullabies, clumsy but heartfelt. And in that moment, you realize that while Erectus survived by strength and patience, Sapiens survived by connection. Language turned survival into story, and story turned the night into home. You curl against the earth, eyes closing. The last thing you hear, a soft laugh, a whispered phrase, maybe a secret. And you drift into dreams with the comforting thought that long before books or bedtime podcasts, humans were already talking each other to sleep. The fire has burned low again, and this time the night feels colder, the stars sharper, as though the sky itself is brittle. You pull your fur cloak tighter, but the chill creeps through anyway. Around you, both Sapiens and Erectus stir uneasily. The air tells you something important. This land is changing. And today you'll walk through the heart of the real killer, not lions or hyenas, but climate itself. You trudge across the plain as dawn breaks, breath puffing white in the air. Grass crunches underfoot, brittle with frost. The Erectus march forward as if nothing has changed, their broad chests steaming, their gait steady. Built like tanks, they endure. The Sapiens, however, look restless. They stop often, gathering around small fires, pulling skins tighter. They adapt differently, not with sheer endurance, but with cleverness. Already you notice them sewing scraps together, inventing layers. One fashion innovation at a time, survival becomes wearable. Mainstream historical fact: the Pleistocene epoch, the great stage of both Erectus and Sapiens, was an era of violent swings. Ice ages and warm periods cycled back and forth like a pendulum, sometimes within just a few thousand years. Imagine your weather app flipping from tropical to Arctic tundra with no warning. Animals shifted, rivers dried, forests became deserts, then froze solid. Whoever survived here wasn't just strong, they had to bend without breaking. You stop by a frozen riverbank, listening to the crunch of ice underfoot. The Erectus crouches, smashes through with a stone, and drinks greedily. The Sapiens pauses, then breaks the ice differently, cutting it into blocks to carry back to camp. You smirk. Even in prehistory, one group lives in the moment, the other thinks about tomorrow's thirst. The quirky tidbit sneaks into your mind. Some researchers argue that early humans may have used animal dung as insulation. Picture it, stuffing huts with dried droppings to keep the wind out, or smearing it on skin like primitive sunscreen. You laugh softly, imagining sapiens in fur cloaks with crocodile dung face masks, the prehistoric version of spa day, survival and skincare, neatly bundled. But debates swirl endlessly. Scholars still argue whether Homo erectus failed because they couldn't adapt to climate shifts, or whether they simply settled in the wrong regions at the wrong times. Some fossils suggest Erectus lingered longest in Southeast Asia, where climates were relatively stable, while Sapiens thrived in Africa and later Europe by enduring harsher shifting environments. Did Erectus stay too comfortable, too rooted, while Sapiens chased the edge of change? Or was it pure luck, the roll of evolutionary dice? The evidence is scattered, and so your footsteps feel uncertain too. By midday, the landscape transforms again. Frost gives way to dust, hot winds scouring your face. You stumble through parched scrubland, throat dry. The Erectus, shoulders hunched, plod forward relentlessly as if made of stone. The Sapiens look around, scanning for signs, bird flight paths, insect swarms, the faint smell of water. You watch them split into pairs, scouting in different directions. Soon one calls out, pointing to a depression where green shoots hide a seep of groundwater. You kneel beside them, cupping the cool liquid and think, brains over brawn, again. You sit with both groups in the heat, gnawing on dried roots. Sweat stings your eyes, but you're also struck by how differently these humans handle hunger. The Erectus eat what's there, plain and raw. The Sapiens grind seeds between stones, mixing with spit to make a paste, primitive porridge. Not exactly a Michelin star meal, but in a land of drought, it's calories. You grin, thinking how humans have never stopped inventing ways to make bad food edible. Fast food, instant noodles, it's all porridge's great-grandchild. The sun dips but the wind rises. Clouds roll heavy, black with rain, and suddenly you're soaked, mud pulling at your ankles. The Erectus endure it grimly, trudging through without complaint. The Sapiens, though, lash branches into a crude shelter, piling hides across the top to block the rain. You huddle under with them, dripping but slightly warmer. You can't help but whisper, adaptability doesn't always mean strength. Sometimes it means laziness, wanting to stay dry and comfy, even in a storm. And maybe that's the true spark of progress. Night returns cold again. Frost forms on the edges of the shelter, glittering under moonlight. The Erectus lie on the ground, muscles taut, breathing shallow against the cold. The Sapiens curl together, but they've also ringed the camp with stones to block the wind. One tends the fire, feeding it patiently with dried grass stored earlier. You see the difference. Erectus survives through toughness. Sapiens survives through preparation. Historians still argue whether this difference was decisive. Could Erectus simply not shift fast enough when grasslands turned to deserts or when forests froze over? Or did they adapt, but slower, with fewer experiments, fewer gambles? You feel the tension between the two strategies in your own body. Endure the storm or outthink it. Both work until the storm grows bigger. As you drift towards sleep, you remember modern echoes, people stockpiling for winter storms, others improvising when the power goes out. Survival is never just about muscle. It's about foresight, flexibility, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. You stretch under the furs, eyelids heavy. Outside, the wind howls like a hungry predator scouring the earth. But inside the shelter, the Sapiens' murmurs soothe you, warm and soft. Fire crackles, water drips, the earth breathes. You realize that climate has always been the silent judge of human destiny. Erectus stood tall, unyielding like a mountain. Sapiens bent, shifted, improvised, like reeds in the wind. And in a world where the wind never stops changing, perhaps reeds endure longer than stone. You rise with the dawn again, stretching sore legs, only to realize the camp is already in motion. The Sapiens pack bundles of hides and tools, children riding on hips, elders leaning on sticks. The Erectus too are on the move, but their rhythm is different. Slow, steady, like a tide creeping forward. You follow both groups, and for the first time you sense that this journey is not just a day's hunt. It is migration. It is destiny written across continents. You trudge behind them, sand grinding under your sandals, and remember the mainstream historical fact. Homo erectus were the first humans to leave Africa. Nearly 2 million years ago, they crossed into Asia, reaching as far as China and Indonesia. Imagine the courage, or desperation, it must have taken to walk into unknown lands without maps, compasses, or even a sense of what lay beyond the next horizon. Erectus blazed trails your own species would later follow, though ironically, their pioneering spread may have sown the seeds of their eventual isolation. As the sun climbs higher, you notice how differently the groups treat the journey. The Erectus press forward with few stops, bodies built for endurance. They leave behind little, stone flakes, broken bones, footprints pressed into drying mud. They move like shadows across the landscape, present but fleeting. The Sapiens, however, mark their passing. You watch one scratch a symbol into a tree, another leave a pile of shells by a riverbank. Even migration becomes expression, a breadcrumb trail of meaning scattered across the world. The quirky tidbit that comes to mind makes you laugh softly. Archaeologists have found Erectus remains on the island of Java, which raises the puzzling question, how did they get there? Some propose they built simple rafts, clinging to logs and currents, braving seas without knowing where they led. Picture it, Homo erectus surfers, drifting into the unknown. It sounds absurd, yet bones don't lie. Somehow, these silent cousins crossed waters that even modern sailors respect. Still, scholars argue endlessly about the pattern of sapiens migrations. Did your species sweep out of Africa in a single dramatic wave around 60,000 years ago, or in scattered pulses over hundreds of thousands of years? Fossils hint at both possibilities. Some sapiens may have wandered into the Middle East long before the Big Exodus. Others suggest waves of migration, some failing, some thriving. You feel the uncertainty in your own steps. Each footprint erased by wind, each theory rewritten by a new discovery. By midday, the landscape changes again. Grasslands fade into rolling hills, then into sparse woodland. Herds of gazelles leap across your path, and predators trail silently in the distance. The Erectus keeps marching, unbothered, their rhythm unchanging. The sapiens, however, scatter briefly to gather plants, then regroup. You notice something small but crucial. They share news about which paths have water, which valleys hold danger. Migration for Erectus is endurance. Migration for sapiens is networking. The sun burns hot and you pause by a stream to drink. Here you notice the practical difference between the two groups. The Erectus crouch low, slurping until their bellies swell. The sapiens fill skins with water, carry them strapped on backs. You smile, recognizing the ancestor of your modern water bottle, an idea so simple yet life-saving on long treks. You think about how many of humanity's breakthroughs are not flashy inventions, but humble hacks for surviving the mundane. Evening falls, and the group set camp near a grove of trees. The Erectus collapse into rest, too drained to do more than gnaw dried meat. The sapiens, however, light fires in a circle, cook carefully, and even swap stories of the day's trek. You watch children draw lines in the dirt, tracing rivers and mountains. Geography turns into memory, memory into maps. No parchment, no ink, just the mind storing routes like living atlases. It dawns on you that migration is not just walking, it is storytelling across space. You drift into thought, picturing the vast scope of these journeys. Erectus spread across continents but seem to stagnate, their tools unchanged for ages. Sapiens spread too, but they kept adapting, switching prey, inventing shelters, carving bone needles for sewing. The open scholarly debate remains, was sapiens' spread inevitable because of their brains, or was it a lucky accident of timing and environment? Did climate push Erectus into corners while sapiens caught the brakes of warmer interglacials? Or did sapiens simply outcompete, pushing Erectus into extinction? The night deepens, and stars blaze overhead. You realize how migration itself must have shaped the sapiens' mind. Walking day after day across deserts and forests, they told stories to pass the time. They gossiped, sang, plotted. And through those words, they built identity. We are the people who crossed the mountains. We are the ones who found the river. Erectus migrated too, but in silence. Without stories, the journey ends when the footprints fade. With stories, the journey becomes legend. The wind rustles the branches, carrying scents of strange lands. You wrap yourself tighter in your hide, wondering what it must have felt like to crest a ridge and see a new horizon, a valley no ancestor had ever seen, a coastline where the ocean stretched endless. The terror, the awe, you can feel it in your chest. Migration wasn't just survival, it was wonder. You lie down, listening to the whispers of the sapiens by the fire, their words weaving roots and risks. The Erectus sleep heavily, their breathing a steady chorus. And you think to yourself, both walked far, farther than most animals ever range. But only one turned footsteps into maps, maps into memory, memory into heritage. That difference is why you are here, tracing their echoes in your DNA. The fire crackles, sparks drifting upward like tiny travelers of their own, vanishing into the night sky. You close your eyes, drifting, carried forward by the endless march of humanity across continents. You wake to a softer sound than usual, not the rustle of predators or the crackle of firewood, but the quiet murmur of laughter. Not just the laughter of sapiens, but something deeper, more complicated. You rub your eyes and realize the two groups, Sapiens and Erectus, have drifted closer together. Camps that once sat on opposite sides of the clearing now share its edges. Tonight you'll walk into a delicate realm, not survival against climate or beasts, but survival through connection, rivalry, and even intimacy. You sit cross-legged, watching as a young sapiens lingers near the Erectus fire. Their eyes meet, different shapes, different skulls, but unmistakably human curiosity sparking between them. You shift uncomfortably because you know where this might lead. And here comes the mainstream fact. DNA evidence shows that Homo sapiens interbred with other hominin species, like Neanderthals and Denisovans. While we don't yet have definitive proof for Erectus specifically, the possibility lingers. After all, humans have never been great at keeping to themselves. The quirky tidbit makes you grin. Geneticists discovered that modern people in certain parts of the world carry tiny traces of Denisovan DNA that help adapt to high altitudes like in Tibet. Imagine it. Romances in dark caves tens of thousands of years ago left you with the ability to climb Mount Everest without gasping as much. Love affairs with ancient cousins literally reshaped lungs and blood. You chuckle softly, realizing that romance, however awkward, can be a survival strategy. But scholars still argue whether Sapiens and Erectus actually mixed. Fossil evidence is tricky. DNA breaks down over time, and Erectus bones are often too old to preserve genetic material. Some suggest Sapiens and Erectus never met intimately, only clashed at watering holes. Others whisper that rare encounters happened in lonely valleys, leaving children who carried fragments of both. You sit by the fire, realizing that either way, the truth is messy. Humanity's story is rarely clean. It's tangled, like the roots of trees gripping the soil. You trail them into the grasslands during the day. Here, rivalry bubbles beneath the surface. Both groups eye the same herds of antelope, the same berry patches. Erectus grips hand axes firmly, scanning the horizon with suspicion. Sapiens carry their spears and chatter strategies under their breath. The hunt feels less about food and more about competition. When the antelope scatters, both groups lunge, their shouts echoing across the savanna. Spears fly, axes swing, and in the end, both secure kills. But as they drag the carcasses back, glances are sharp, territorial. You could almost hear the unspoken words. This is our land, our meal, our right to survive. And yet that night around the fire, the mood softens. A sapiens child wanders toward the Erectus camp, curious, offering a bone toy. An Erectus child grabs it, giggles, and soon both are rolling in the dust, chasing each other under the starlight. You feel the tension in the adult's eyes, but you also see something impossible to deny. Children don't care about species. They care about play. You wonder if it was this innocence that sometimes opened doors for cooperation, or perhaps for unions across the invisible line. The days pass, and you begin to notice a pattern. Rivalry during the hunt, yes. But when storms roll in, or when predators circle, the groups edge closer. One night, a leopard screams from the darkness. Both camps jolt awake, Erectus hefting axes, Sapiens spears. The leopard slinks away, but in that charged silence you realize survival sometimes demands allies, even uneasy ones, and allies sharing fear might soon share more. You tilt your head back, staring at the constellations. Imagine a Sapiens whispering a song to an Erectus partner, or an Erectus bringing roasted marrow as an offering. Awkward? Undoubtedly. But humans are nothing if not persistent romantics. Your mind drifts to modern parallels. Romeo and Juliet, forbidden loves. Turns out, your species invented that genre long before Shakespeare, and yet the rivalry never disappears. One morning, you see Erectus driving Sapiens away from a watering hole with stones. Another day, Sapiens ambush an Erectus hunt, stealing part of the kill. These are not fairy tales. They are clashes written in sweat and bruises. You feel the heat of anger ripple through both groups, and for a moment, you sense that coexistence teeters on the edge of violence. Historians still debate which side held the advantage. Some argue Erectus, with their endurance and established range, must have dominated territories at first. Others suggest Sapiens' coordination, weapons, and language gave them the upper hand. Maybe it shifted constantly like tides. Sometimes Sapiens bent, sometimes Erectus snapped, sometimes both simply endured. But here, in the flicker of firelight, you glimpse the strange truth. Rivalry and intimacy are not opposites. They are often twins, born from the same tension. Competition over land may spark hostility, but it also pushes groups closer, forces contact, and in those contacts, sometimes children are born. Children who blur the very lines of the conflict. You lean back, watching as the Sapiens and Erectus once again circle each other by the fire, some with suspicion, some with curiosity. The night hums with possibility. You can almost hear the whisper of DNA threads weaving together, invisible but enduring. And you realize, survival is not just about killing or enduring. Sometimes it's about who you choose to love, or at least who you end up sharing a cave with on a cold night. You curl into your hide, the fire's warmth fading as sleep tugs at your eyelids. In the distance you hear low laughter, voices mingling in ways you can't quite distinguish. Rivalry, alliance, romance, it all blurs together. The boundaries between species, like shadows, never stay fixed. And perhaps that is why Sapiens remained. Not because they refused contact, but because they embraced it, messily, imperfectly, stubbornly human. The night is restless. You stir in your sleep to a sound that makes your skin crawl, the guttural cough of a lion somewhere beyond the fire's glow. You freeze, listening. The Sapiens tighten their circle, spears angled outward, while the Erectus crouch low, axes in hand. Tonight, you'll discover that the story of survival isn't only about climate or cleverness. It's about teeth, claws, and the way humans, of any kind, respond to the dark. You sit up, heart pounding, realizing a blunt truth. In this world you are not the apex predator. Far from it. Lions, hyenas, saber-toothed cats, crocodiles, everywhere. Something is bigger, faster, sharper. The mainstream fact strikes you. Even as recently as 100,000 years ago, hominins were still prey animals as often as hunters. Fossils from caves show gnaw marks on ancient bones, suggesting our ancestors sometimes ended up as someone else's dinner. The comforting image of man the mighty hunter is, in truth, only half the story. The eerie laughter of hyenas drifts closer, and you realize the Sapiens have prepared differently. They've built their fire high, smoke curling thick into the night sky, an unmistakable signal, we're here, don't mess with us. The Erectus, by contrast, stand in the shadows, relying on muscle and stone. Both strategies might work or fail. Fire frightens predators, yes, but it also advertises your location. Strength intimidates, yes, but what happens when the predator doesn't care? The quirky tidbit comes to mind with a grin despite the tension. Some anthropologists believe early humans may have used leftover animal bones as noisemakers, rattles or clappers, to scare predators. Imagine it, A sapiens shaking a hyena femur maraca like some prehistoric DJ, hoping the rhythm drives lions away. You chuckle softly, even as you picture yourself clutching one right now. Just in case. But scholars still argue whether Homo erectus hunted as effectively as sapiens, or whether they scavenged more often, snatching scraps from predator kills. Evidence shows cut marks on bones overlaid with tooth marks, suggesting sometimes humans arrived late to the feast. Were erectus the brave hunters, or were they clever thieves trailing lions, waiting to steal leftovers? The debate rages on, as fiery as any camp battle. Day breaks, and you march with the groups into the open plain. Herds of zebra graze in the distance, dust rising as they stamp and shuffle. Predators circle the edges, shadows moving in the tall grass. The erectus grip their axes, preparing to run down prey the old way. Persistence hunts, chasing until the animal collapses from exhaustion. You can almost feel their lungs pumping, their legs pounding the earth. The sapiens, however, pause, crouch, and whisper. They strategize, circling the herd, setting an ambush. When the spears fly, it's coordinated, deadly, efficient. The kill is quick. The zebra thrashes, then falls. You feel relief, but also unease, because predators smell blood too. Within minutes, vultures wheel overhead, their shadows flickering on the ground. A hyena trots closer, eyes gleaming. The erectus roar, waving arms, chasing it back. The sapiens, however, haul the carcass toward the fire they've already lit, smoke billowing, scent masked. You see the difference clearly. Brute courage versus planned deterrence. Both work, but one costs more risk. By midday, you rest in the shade of thorn trees, gnawing meat, your fingers sticky with grease. You lick them clean, though, because water is scarce, and wasting it on washing feels luxurious. You smirk. Humans have never been the tidiest eaters. But as you rest, your ears prick at a sound behind you. A leopard. It slinks through the underbrush, muscles rippling, eyes locked on the weakest in the group. The erectus leap to their feet, axes ready. They shout, stomp, brandish stone. The leopard hesitates, snarls, then slinks away. You exhale, but your heart hammers. You've just felt the eternal truth. Every nap, every meal, every moment of rest in prehistory was stolen time. Survival meant living with danger curled around you like a cat waiting to pounce. At nightfall, the camp split strategies again. The erectus choose high ground, resting under rocky outcrops where predators can't sneak easily. The sapiens build thorn branch fences, crude but effective, ringed with fires at each corner. You step between the two camps, admiring both approaches. One trusts nature's barriers, the other builds its own. And in that distinction, you see the whisper of the future. Walls, cities, fortresses, born from the same need to keep teeth and claws at bay. Historians still argue whether sapiens' edge came from weapons, group size, or sheer adaptability to predators. Some think erectus relied too much on strength, leaving them vulnerable to surprise. Others argue sapiens simply multiplied faster, overwhelming predators with numbers. You glance at both groups and wonder if the truth is simpler. Survival may come not from being the strongest, but from being the most annoying to eat. After all, predators prefer easy meals. A noisy, smoky, spear-throwing group might just be more trouble than it's worth. The moon rises, silver and cold. You curl under your hide, still jumpy, ears tuned to every rustle. You think about your modern world. Locked doors, street lights, the illusion of safety. But deep inside, your body remembers this. The long nights when you were prey. The quickened heartbeat, the instinct to huddle close, the comfort of firelight. These are not just stories. They're imprinted in your bones, whispered down from sapiens who survived because they never forgot the dark had teeth. You close your eyes, listening to the crackle of fire, the mutter of voices, the distant growl fading into silence. Tonight, you realize that survival was never about dominance over nature. It was about learning to endure the fear and still sleep anyway. To wake in the morning with another chance to walk forward. To be small, vulnerable, hunted, and yet stubbornly alive. You wake to silence, an odd, unsettling silence. No chatter from the sapiens, no steady grunts from the erectus, only the wind sighing through tall grass carrying dust across the plain. You stand, brush dirt from your legs, and realize you've come to the edge of a mystery. The footprints that trailed behind Erectus for nearly 2 million years are thinning, fading, vanishing into nothing. Tonight, you'll follow those last trails and wonder why one cousin disappeared while another endured. You walk slowly, scanning the ground. Fossilized footprints, scattered stone tools, fragments of bone, faint echoes of a species that once ranged across continents. Then suddenly, nothing. A mainstream fact echoes in your mind. The last known Homo erectus fossils date to about 100,000 years ago on the island of Java. By that time, sapiens had already begun to spread. Neanderthals thrived in Europe, and Denisovans roamed parts of Asia. Erectus, the marathon survivor, dwindled into isolation, and finally, silence. You kneel, tracing a faint print fossilized in hardened mud. It is broad, steady, unmistakably human, but it leads nowhere. You can almost imagine the last groups of Erectus, small bands clinging to shrinking habitats, hunting fewer animals, their fires dimming. The quirky tidbit stirs in your mind. Some scientists suggest that volcanic eruptions in Indonesia might have delivered the final blow. Imagine ash clouds blotting the sun, forests collapsing, rivers choked with mud. For a species already stretched thin, that would have been less an apocalypse than a slow suffocation. But historians still argue fiercely. Was it climate swings, predation, competition with sapiens, or simply dwindling numbers that erased Erectus? Did they vanish suddenly, or did they fade quietly over tens of thousands of years? Some even propose that Erectus didn't truly die out but blended into later populations, becoming distant threads woven invisibly into other lineages. The truth, you realize, is like smoke, impossible to hold. You trudge further, the landscape shifting from savanna to dense forest. Here you picture the last Erectus families huddled in caves, firelight flickering across brow ridges. Were they aware of their decline? Did they sense that fewer children survived, that game grew scarce, that cousins with sharper spears pressed ever closer? Or did life feel normal, hunt, eat, rest, until suddenly there were none left? Extinction is rarely dramatic. It is often a whisper. Nearby, you see sapiens' footprints mingling, fresh and plentiful, weaving in countless directions. Their camps expand, their fires multiply, their tools diversify. In comparison, the Erectus traces feel still, repetitive, predictable. You wonder if that predictability itself was their undoing. They had perfected survival for stable times, but when change accelerated, their steadiness became fragility. Meanwhile, sapiens thrived precisely because they broke patterns, invented new ones, stumbled into mistakes that occasionally turned into breakthroughs. You pause by a river, imagining Erectus and sapiens meeting here one last time. Perhaps there was conflict, perhaps trade, perhaps only wary glances across the water. Did the sapiens notice their cousins fading? Did they mourn, or even realize? Or was Erectus simply one more shadow passing into the background, gone without ceremony? You tilt your head, thinking of modern extinctions, species gone, while most of humanity hardly notices. The pattern is older than civilization. Evening falls, and you follow the sapiens into a new camp buzzing with life. They carve bones, sing, plan hunts, tell stories. You glance toward the dark forest, where no fire flickers for Erectus. A hollow pang grips you, a sense of loss deeper than explanation. For 2 million years, they walked the earth. They endured droughts, predators, migrations, storms, and yet now in this moment they are gone. Their silence is the foundation on which sapiens builds noise. The scholarly debate churns again in your thoughts. Some insist sapiens pushed Erectus aside, out-competing them for resources. Others argue Erectus simply aged out, their slow adaptation rate no match for a chaotic world. A few cling to the romantic idea that Erectus's spirit lingers in you, that survival is not about replacement but absorption. The old carried forward in the new. You find yourself liking that last notion. After all, when you touch your brow, you can almost feel the ridge, faint but remembered. The night deepens. Crickets trill, owls hoot, the wind shifts cool. You sit by the sapiens' fire, but your gaze drifts to the empty darkness where Erectus once camped. You imagine their last embers dying, their last lullabies swallowed by silence. The footprints vanish, but the mystery lingers. Did they go quietly, or did they rage, holding on until the very end? You'll never know. And maybe that's what makes the story heavy on your chest. The unanswerable questions etched not in fossils, but in absence. You lie back, staring at the stars. The constellations haven't changed since Erectus gazed at them. Maybe they wondered, as you do now, what stories the lights carried. Maybe they dreamed of gods, or maybe they simply admired the shine. Either way, the stars remain, witnesses to both survival and vanishing. Their patient light falls equally on sapiens who endured and Erectus who did not. Sleep tugs at your eyes, but not before one last thought curls through your mind. Footprints fade, fires die, names vanish. Yet every extinction leaves an echo, and every echo shapes what remains. Perhaps Erectus is not gone, but woven invisibly into you, less a disappearance than a whisper, telling you to walk a little farther, dream a little longer, endure a little more. You stir from uneasy dreams, the fire crackling low, and realize you've come to the last stretch of the journey. The Erectus are gone now. Vanished trails, vanished camps, vanished voices. Only the sapiens remain around you, their chatter, their laughter, their whispers threading through the night air. Yet as you sit there, watching sparks climb into the darkness, you sense that Erectus is not truly gone. They linger, faint but unshakable in you, in your bones. You glance down at your own hands. 5 fingers, nimble and restless. A mainstream fact rises to mind. Many of the skeletal features you carry, the arch of your foot for long-distance walking, the shape of your pelvis for upright stride, were refined long before sapiens. Much of that design came from Erectus, honed through endless migrations and hunts. You are not just sapiens, you are a collage, a patchwork stitched from ancestors who endured. Erectus walks in your gait even now. The sapiens around the fire keep busy. One sharpens a blade, another hums, a third nurses a child. You can't help noticing how ordinary it feels, as though life simply continued. And that, perhaps, is the strangest truth. Extinction is quiet, survival is mundane. Nobody announces the last Erectus. There's no drum roll, no memorial stone. The world simply tilts, and one group takes the stage while another steps into shadow. You sip water from a hide flask, and think about how many ordinary moments, meals, jokes, lullabies, are the real markers of history. The quirky tidbit drifts into your head with a smirk. Some paleoanthropologists once theorized that Erectus may have been the first to invent rafts, and by doing so, might have reached islands far offshore. If true, that makes them humanity's first sailors. Picture it. Your extinct cousins balancing nervously on floating logs, clutching fire bundles, drifting into blue unknowns. They might have vanished, but not before planting seeds of daring that your species still carries every time someone launches a boat into open sea. And yet, the debates still swirl like smoke. Historians still argue whether sapiens truly outcompeted Erectus through intelligence and culture, or whether Erectus simply succumbed to the slow erosion of time. Was sapiens' survival inevitable, written in bigger brains and sharper tools? Or was it sheer chance, a lucky break in climate, a quirk of disease, a random disaster that spared one and ended the other? You tilt your head, listening to the fire hiss, realizing that certainty is impossible. Even now, scholars gnash teeth over incomplete fossils, half-burned hearths, ambiguous bones. The truth may never be fully known. And perhaps that is fitting. Life is not an equation, but a story, messy and unresolved. The sapiens begin to sing. Low, rhythmic, a melody weaving into the night. You let it wash over you, feeling the way sound vibrates in your ribs. The song is not for survival. It doesn't feed or clothe or shield from predators, but it binds. It says, we are here together, still breathing. And that, maybe, was sapiens' real weapon. Not sharper spears, not bigger brains, but the ability to believe in one another. You lie back on the earth, gazing at the stars one final time in this long journey. Above you, the constellations burn steady. Erectus saw them. Sapiens saw them. You see them. That thread has never broken. And in that thought you sense the echo, not just of survival, but of connection, stretching across species, across ages, into your very marrow. You exhale slowly, heavy with the weight of prehistory. The Erectus are gone, yes, but their story lingers every time you walk, every time you strike fire, every time you chase a dream into the unknown. They may have vanished, but they are not forgotten. They are written in your DNA, in your habits, even in your fears of the dark. Their footprints might end, but yours continue, carrying them forward in silence. And now, as the fire dims, you feel the story settling, like ash falling gently to earth. The noise of debate, the clash of theories, the raw questions, they fade. What remains is simple. You are here because others were. You are alive because shadows before you endured. And in that quiet truth, you find peace. The fire has become little more than a shimmer, faint red veins glowing in the ash. You feel the night air soften, cool but no longer sharp, like a blanket pulled across the earth. Around you, the voices fall quiet, words giving way to sighs, to yawns, to the steady rhythm of breathing. The story has carried you far, across plains and rivers, through hunts and storms, alongside cousins who have long since gone. But now the journey slows, like footsteps easing on a downhill path. You close your eyes, and the images linger faintly. A heavy brow ridge glinting in firelight, a higher forehead darting with ideas. Fires tended in caves, footprints pressed into dust, songs whispered under endless stars. They blur together, fading not into loss but into calm, as if the boundaries no longer matter. Extinction and survival dissolve into the same lullaby. Lives lived, nights endured, mornings greeted. Your breath deepens. The world around you grows softer, the details slipping away. The predators are gone, the storms have passed, the competition has ended. All that remains is a sense of continuity, a thread that runs from then to now, carrying you forward like a gentle current. You are safe here, wrapped in echoes, rocked by time itself. The fire whispers its last spark. The sky glows faint with starlight, and you let yourself drift, your body sinking heavier, your mind lighter. You are not prey, not predator, not rival. You are simply part of the story, resting where countless others have rested before you. And with that, your eyes close fully, and sleep takes you, quiet, steady, eternal as the stars.